Hi, I'm Gary Ansel, and I'm with Misti Malone and Tamara Syrek Jensen, and we're doing VIVA Unscripted, kind of giving an update about the meeting and where we're at. We're really happy to have both of you here. I mean, I think a big part of VIVA is the fact that we try to bring not only the balanced specialties that treat vascular disease, but all our colleagues in taking care of these patients, including FDA and CMS, because we play a very, very big, important role of what we can do, how we do it, and actually the partnership is really important. So I know you've said, Misti, you said that you've been here for much of the week. We really appreciate that. We really value your input. So is there anything surprised you this year, or tell us any highlights that you saw?
Nothing is particularly surprising, but I've really enjoyed the discussion. I appreciate the candor of the clinicians as they discuss which devices they like best, which ones they like here. Perhaps mention where they're using devices off-label. Maybe it's an opportunity for discussions in the future. So I appreciate the candor and openness of this particular conference. There's been a lot of good data, and I learned more about the European and their European changes to their regulations and what we may expect at FDA. It sounds like we might be a little bit busier in the future.
Well, we're really, really happy you're here, and we really do appreciate the partnership. Tamara, I know when you're walking around, you're usually getting put on the spot for different things, including carotid stenting and those kind of things. But from a CMS standpoint, how do you think, can we do something different at the meeting that actually heightens our awareness, our partnership with CMS? Because I know actually, as I talk to people, and myself included, a lot of times we have misconceptions and things like that.
Well, thank you for the question, because I was just having a conversation with one of your colleagues where I said perhaps, as I was walking around this year, I did have the sense that they don't quite understand what CMS does. And so perhaps CMS needs to do a better job of explaining that. And so I asked him, maybe next year we can start off with, what is it that we do? How do we partner with all of you? And kind of get rid of those misperceptions on what we do or don't do. Because I think one of the key things we've really been working at over the last 2 years is reaching out to our community, all of our stakeholders, patients, especially the clinicians, and the manufacturers, and trying to figure out, okay, where is the space where we can work together, which is one of the reasons I was trying to demonstrate all the different coverage pathways there really are for everyone to get a coverage decision, and showing what we're really doing in evidence generation as well. So I had a lot to say in 7 minutes, and I didn't make it, so I did it in 9 minutes, and I still have a lot more to say.
I love it, actually, because we played a part in the government meeting, or the session earlier, and the one thing that I thought was really, really good is the fact that bringing out that there's the different sections of CMS. And, I think we do, because we're brought in to advise a lot of the companies and startups. And I think I'm more used to that on the FDA standpoint, because that's usually more science, and statistics, where CMS, I think we really have to get back. And I think to the main point, which to your point was, what's the benefit to our constituents? And in fact, I laugh because some of the times we miss the fact that Medicare actually is for the 65 and older group,
yes.
And we have to make sure that we're hitting that.
Yes.
Somebody asked one time about a young person trial, and I went, that's not going to be them. I'm sorry, not this time. So, Misti, as FDA has played a role in this and helped us trying to define where we're going, I do think there's an actually much more positive kind of step in everybody's walk this year, because we have partnered with you to bring First and Me into the U.S. This is the first time I think I've been at a VIVA that I didn't hear the woe is me, we're always getting things 10 years later than everybody else. Mm-hmm. Do you get that feedback at FDA that you are having a positive impact on all this?
Usually we receive it at conferences, but we've had more companies, I guess, say thank you. We would prefer to partner with companies, particularly early on in development. As one of the sessions, Surmodics noted, it may have been a little challenging to get through the early feasibility study at first, because we were both learning about the novel technology. But then as we moved forward through the process, it was more efficient in the end. And that was one of the early feasibility studies. And now we've learned a lot more, and the process, I hope, is more efficient. We also have other opportunities, such as breakthrough devices. Though in cardiovascular, we try to incorporate all of those ideas of least burdensome pathway, allowing some uncertainty. As you heard there, Ken Cavanaugh mentioned that we take in the uncertainty. Is there an opportunity that we could look at a particular patient population in the trial to minimize variability and confounders, but then generalize it to a larger population post-market, rather than asking a company to evaluate single, specific, very specific populations pre-market. So we're working to expand our thinking, but also to bring devices to patients earlier. And we understand that there's a large unmet clinical need in CLI. We've heard that throughout the entire conference here at multiple sessions. And hearing that helps us gauge how we should be spending our time.
That's super. The other thing that got brought up in the government session is the fact that there's now trying to be a worldwide kind of cooperation or whatever. I know there's a more technical term for it than that. How much are you interacting with PMDA and the different, or is there one you're interacting with a lot more than others, or how is that going?
So I work with Ken on the working group, so I interact probably more than some of the other groups at FDA. We've gotten the area of cardiovascular started a bit more quickly, but there's opportunity to move maybe to orthopedics or other areas and start those partnerships. So I interact fairly often. The PMDA reviewers are fantastic. We reach across the table and ask each other questions. Before they were studying atherectomy devices, they would ask us questions. What do we think are good endpoints? And they also gain information from these conferences. So we reach across the table to PMDA. I was lucky enough to be part of one of the IMDRF discussions for real-world evidence a little over a year ago. And that was a great discussion because I met colleagues from the European Union, from Canada, Russia, Australia, and being able to explain to PMDA or other groups how we're using real-world evidence in our decision making then influences maybe how they're more willing to accept that uncertainty.
And to follow up a question on that, when there's a trial done across country boundaries, you know, most of the trials that we're really looking for are the ones that have, you know, independent adjudication. Mm-hmm. Is it more desirable to have a core lab in the U.S. doing that core lab adjudication? Does it matter? What's the current input from FDA on those kind of trials, since we are getting a lot more international?
I'm not sure it matters. We'd like a quality core lab. The process has been validated. It's understandable. It's objective. I think those are the criteria we're looking for rather than where it's located globally.
Super. Tamara, in the earlier session, you also brought up the fact that we talked about just a couple minutes ago about getting more data on the benefit to the constituents. And when we bring things to FDA, though they've got guidance documents and things like that, they really like to respond to the company's plan for that. Does CMS have, for specific devices, what they define as a benefit to their constituents, or is that more of a discussion partnership, or how does that work?
So we certainly have the authority to write guidance documents. So I think what you're asking is, have we defined what reasonable and necessary means, and if you can meet that threshold, we'll cover that particular device. So we don't have any guidance documents that defines reasonable and necessary. We have a lot of discussions with the manufacturers. The difference between CMS, among many differences, but one of the differences between CMS and FDA is FDA approves or clears devices manufacturer by manufacturer. We don't really care who the manufacturer is. Ours is really about a device, and we are name brand agnostic to it. And so it really is data about that particular device, and does it improve health outcomes for that particular device. We are trying to move into creating more predictability and what milestones or what thresholds you need to meet in order to be covered. And so we started that with our MedCAC, so that's our advisory committee in the heart failure space. It's a challenge. I mean, I always throw this back out to everyone else, like, well, how would we do that? You can't, we do drugs and devices and biologics, and you can't write, I don't believe you can write a guidance document that has the same evidence for all of those. So do you do it by disease state? Like, how do we do all of that? And so we're working through that because I know we need to do something. It's just, what is it? But can I add one thing to early feasibility studies?
Sure.
I meant to do it on our panel earlier. I think as we talk about early feasibility studies, we are missing the payer in that conversation. And we really need to add the payer to those conversations, whether that is Medicare or a private payer. So Medicare has done a lot in the early feasibility studies space, and we have been working, I'm on the MDIC and in an early feasibility study work group on how do we get these studies, one, approved quicker, I think, by FDA, and then where does CMS play into that? And so while CMS has not paid for or covered first in human early feasibility studies, because we do think that's truly experimental, we have given each of these manufacturers a pathway and how you can get covered. And so we usually, it's a negotiation and we have a threshold of what that is, and then they come back, and if they meet it, we can usually approve that within 15 to 20 days. So I just want to, as we think about the big picture and look forward, don't forget about the payer in anything you do with the FDA.
I think that's a really good point, because I think historically it was so much more difficult and lengthy to get anything done that they didn't just want to add any more questions.
Right.
But now I think with the new effort to try to get first demand done here, without a doubt being much more cooperative and more partnered, that asking these questions earlier on can certainly make a huge benefit and really save people from spending a lot of money and then not having the answer at the end of it.
Right.
Because that is not where we want to be, that's for sure.
Yeah, we are trying, so the agency is really trying to move forward in innovation, whatever that might mean. And so even if we don't cover your early feasibility study right, first in human, right out the door, you will know what we think. You will know what we want as our outcomes. I think that knowledge is beneficial as someone plans into the future.
So final quick discussion on the economics of healthcare and how expensive everything has gotten, and we're kind of broke as a country, so we have to be more cost effective, things like that. As we move forward, I think people need to understand, to the one point that you brought out, is that you don't pay for a device by so-and-so. You pay for a category of treatment, and it's you making sure that you're hitting that category correctly. And I think that hopefully these partnerships between FDA and Medicare and groups like VIVA can actually broaden these discussions and make things a lot more beneficial and bring things to our patient population really early. Well, we really appreciate you taking time out this afternoon. We really appreciate the time you spent at VIVA this year. And of course, I'll take this opportunity to invite you back next year already.
Thank you.
Because we really
I
do
enjoy it.
enjoy having you here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy it. Thank you.